This is just an informal video to address a problem that some people are having that we're doing the quarter challenge, having some problems with their tendons and hands, repetitive stress injury, the kind of injuries we get from anything that involves hitting something repeatedly or vibration. If you don't think this is a problem, you're an idiot, because it is a problem, and it may not be a problem for short term, but it's a problem in the long run. And if you want to be able to use an axe seriously, then you have to take this stuff seriously, because it's these kind of details that are going to make someone be able to chop for a long period of time versus just short periods of time with time to recover in between. Probably the only reason I haven't had any kind of repetitive stress injury from chopping is because I understand like a series of factors that go into causing it when using an axe, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Let's start with us. Don't take a death grip on the axe. There's rarely any reason that you need to just really grip the hell out of the axe. Obviously, you don't want to let it go and have it go flying off, especially if you're limbing or something like that. But once you gain confidence in your ability to put the axe where you want, at the angle you want, and you're confident in, you know, the shape of your axe to bite, and in the wood and the angles and everything, you just don't need a death grip on the axe, and it will throw your aim off anyway, and it will lead to fatigue just because you're using all these muscles more than you need to. Plus, when you finally hit the piece of wood, it's going to transfer more shock from the handle into your hands. You see people chopping that look like they're trying to force the axe through the wood after it hits the wood, or kind of like follow through or like push the axe through the wood. That doesn't really work anyway, because the chopping is already done by the time the axe hits the wood, or the work is done. There's energy embodied in the axe head, and that's really doing the cutting. So you want to think of it more as like throwing or whipping. Think of it as this is a whip, and you're whipping the head into the wood. So by the time it hits, you can be kind of, you know, fairly relaxed with your grip. If I put this on here and push on it, this is the opposite of advantage. You know, I don't have a mechanical advantage, I have a mechanical disadvantage, because I'm pushing on the end of this long handle, trying to transfer energy into there. That's totally different than the mechanical advantage of chopping with a long handle, this action right here. That's different. If I were to grab the axe like this and just push on it, I could probably do more work than trying to push on it at the end of a long handle. My point being that after you hit this on the wood, you're going to do very little extra work by pushing on it and trying to force it further through the wood or follow through the wood. So that looks something like this. You know, bad heavy, what I would call like a heavy-handed technique is like, you know, taking a strong grip on the axe and then like pushing it, like trying to push it. And I also think that this is a contributing factor to handle breakage a lot of times. What you should be doing is getting, you know, all the work's done here, and then you're just kind of like snapping it into the wood and not holding it that hard. I'll demonstrate on this tree because I'm going to cut it down anyway. Same thing. You know, this is what you don't want to do. And you hear that? Like how much stress and just hard hitting everything? And it's not doing any more work, at least not significant, versus me just kind of whipping the axe easily into the wood over and over again. It also matters a lot what angle we're using. We're like up here deciding, you know, how our strategy, how are we going to chop. So if we go in at 45 degrees, it's going to cut easier. And when it does that, the axe is going to cut deep, and it's going to gradually slow down as it slides and cuts through those fibers. If we hit the tree at 90 degrees, it doesn't cut nearly as deep, maybe like a third as deep or something, half even, but not as much. Listen to the difference between chopping at 45 degrees and chopping at 90 degrees. Hear the difference? Well, I can feel the difference. Like I can feel a significant difference of energy transferred into my hands between those two. Does that mean you should never cut at 90? No, I do it all the time. Let's say if I needed to chop a notch here, but this knot's in my way, I would just come in at 90 near the knot and then at 45 degrees over here. But don't just do it randomly, you know, do it when you need it, do it with intention, and don't just, you see people just doing most of their cutting, like they'll make their notch too narrow and then they end up cutting at just a little bit of an angle or just mostly at 90, just over and over and over again. So don't do that. Try to stick with 45s when you can, because it just works better for all kinds of all those reasons. Okay, so what else? Okay, now we're to the handle. You'll hear me say a lot that handles are too thick or they need to be thinned down, but that's really a simplistic way to look at it when there's also density and flexibility and who knows what. There's like a bunch of factors going into whether a handle is transmitting shock back up the handle or not. And that's not the only reason to have a thin handle, but it's a major one. So this handle is very thin and it transmits less shock than a thick handle. This handle is super thick, super thick. It's an inch thick up here at least. I think it's an inch thick in the middle. It's very, very rigid. Let me show you the difference here. So, okay, new Council Tool Boys axe, 2 fingers. Fairly flexible. This is the same axe but tuned the way I like it. Very flexible. This one, barely flexible. It really looks like the handle's moving inside the eye more than the handle's actually flexing. Okay, so there's a big difference in how much shock each of these transfers into your hands. If you have everything else dialed in and you have really good technique and all of that stuff, this isn't going to do as much damage, but you know, it is a factor. These things are cumulative, like all these things accumulate and gang up to cause this problem. So any of them that you can improve, then you know, you're that much better off. So the way I do that is like, you know, since there's variability in woods, you know, not just from species to species, but from individual piece of wood to individual piece of wood, this is not a uniform material. You can't really just apply some kind of formula. I mean, close, but you know, I'm not going to give you like measurements or anything like that. So I've been tuning up this handle and it's pretty good. Like, it works good now, but I'll probably thin it just a little bit more. And what I'll do is I'll just use it for a while, and if it still feels a little bit stiff, you know, I do this. I stick it in a stump and I bend it and look at it and watch how much it flexes. But ultimately I'm going to end up pulling out a knife, scraping it, using it some more, scraping it down a little more. It's easy to do. Just take your knife at a a 90-degree angle. Like this handle, I want a little bit thinner this way. Still. Yeah, you just do it that way and keep thinning it till it feels right. If it, you know, whatever. These things take time. If you break it, then you learn something. It's all good, as they say here in NorCal. Too much. Okay, let's get to the head. If the head is not cutting, if it doesn't cut well, if it doesn't cut deeply, if it doesn't cut easily, it's going to stop faster, and that's going to send, again, more shock back your way. Most axes as they come from the factory are way too fat and need a lot of material removed in this area to be able to cut easily. Also, this whole transition has to be gentle enough and gradual enough that there's not like a sudden stop, right? Like if say most of this is like thinned down enough in here, but the actual edge is kind of real rounded or obtuse like this, then it's just not going to cut as well. You could take the other extreme and make it kind of like a knife, but it'll cut great, but it'll get damaged because this is you know, it's very stressful on the steel. It's not, you know, it's not like cutting with a knife. You're whacking this thing over and over again into hardwood. So there's a compromise, but bottom line is your axe needs to be cutting. It needs to be cutting well, or you know, that's going to add up, and that can be a major factor. I don't know how axe head weight really affects this. You would think that a heavier head would transmit more shock when it hits because it has more body energy. Not really sure. Handle length could have an effect there too, because a lot of big axes have longer handles, which should dissipate theoretically more energy, I think, for like a given thickness. Not sure about that one. And finally, there's the wood. Maybe you have control over what wood you cut, maybe you don't. It's pretty easy for me to find green trees that need to be cut down anyway, like this little guy here. So not a problem, but if you have to cut in dry wood a lot, especially very hard dry wood, this madrone in the summer is extremely hard. If I had to cut a lot of this, it would definitely be a problem. I would have to dial in everything else, you know, really well to be able to chop in this stuff for hours at a time and then do it the next day. Not going to happen if I don't have my act together. All right, I think that's all I have to say on the subject, and if you have anything to add, any stories, personal experience, or whatever, spit it out.